Another story, and this is a controversy that's been in the making for a while. It also has the Congress party as one of the players, one of the actors here. It's part historic, it's part contemporary. It's over some of these missing letters that were written by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, India's first Prime Minister, when he was in office. Now, some of the personalities that he has written these letters to include the likes of Edwina Mountbatten, who's the wife of the last Viceroy of India, Lord Mountbatten. There were letters from Nehru to Jayaprakash Narayan, to Babu Jagjeevan Ram, to Vijayalakshmi Pandit, a whole host of stalwart figures at that time. Now, the contention is that there were 50 boxes of such letters which were donated after Nehru's time, which were donated to what used to be called the Nehru Memorial Library and Museum. However, those letters, those 50 boxes of letters, were taken away from public access, first by Mrs. Indira Gandhi back in the 1970s, and then subsequently in 2008 at the request of Sonia Gandhi, who was at that time the chairperson of the UPA. Now, the contention by Sonia Gandhi, the Nehru Gandhi family, the Congress party, is that these letters were private in their nature, and these were willed first by Nehru to Indira Gandhi and subsequently from Indira Gandhi to Sonia Gandhi as the custodians of those boxes, the custodian of those letters. And these letters were private in nature. They were not governmental or official communication in that sense, and therefore the family had the authority or the rights to decide whether the public should be given access to these letters. Now, the Nehru Memorial Library and Museum has now been renamed as the Prime Minister's Museum and Library. Of course, it showcases not just prime ministers from the Nehru-Gandhi lineage, it showcases all the prime ministers of India since independence. Now, they have written a letter to Rahul Gandhi, the leader of the opposition, requesting him to return these 50 boxes of letters back. And while action on that front is awaited, there's now a war of words between the Congress and the BJP. The Congress is questioning the BJP's sudden interest in these letters. The BJP says, what is there to hide in these letters? And the question we're asking tonight is, it's a fundamental question to this argument. Can Prime Minister's letters, when they're written in an official capacity as Prime Minister, even if it is personal in nature, can it be claimed as personal or family property, or is it property of the state?
रिक्वेस्ट किया था कि आपके द्वारा जो नेहरू कलेक्शंस में से करीबन 8 अलग अलग सेक्शंस के 51 कार्टून आपने विड्रॉ किए हैं, वो या तो संस्था को वापस लौटाए जाए या हमें उसे देखने की, स्कैन करने की परमिशन दी जाए, या उसका कॉपी आपके द्वारा स्कैन कॉपी हमें उपलब्ध कराया जाए।
The country really wants to know as to what was in these correspondence between, say, Nehru ji and Lady Mountbatten, between Nehru ji and Jagjeevan Ram ji. What were the contents of this letter that the first family felt that it should not be made public?
The RSS and the Godse Bath always wants to defame Nehru ji and Gandhi ji particularly, and they were trying to divert from the real issue of Adani Modi scam now.
All right, I want to go across to two special guests. We'll get both the historic perspective and the legal perspective on this. Vinay Sahasrabudhe is a former Rajya Sabha Member of Parliament and also a member of the Prime Minister's Memorial Museum and Library. And I'm also joined by Jay Anand Dehadrai, who's a lawyer in the Supreme Court. Mr. Sahasrabudhe, the contention that was raised by the Congress party first when Mrs. Indira Gandhi was Prime Minister was that these documents were intended for safekeeping by her rather than to be given as a gift to the Memorial Library and Museum. That these documents could not be accessed by anyone without the express permission of Mrs. Gandhi back in the 70s when this was first given to the Museum and Library. And then subsequently in 2008, when Sonia Gandhi was chairperson of the UPA, she put forth the same condition when she gave these papers over to the Memorial and Museum and Library, was that these documents were intended for safe custody and not meant to be a gift, not meant to be accessed by the public. How do you respond to that?
I think that argument doesn't hold any water because all such documents which are essentially for private consumption kind of and should have limited access, one would keep them at home. If you are giving it to a public institution, which the Pradhan Mantri Sangrahalaya is a public institution, even in its earlier avatar as Nehru Memorial Library, then certainly, I mean, we are not a safe deposit vault of a bank kind of. We are a public organization, we are a library, and people come over there to scan through the documents, get to know, gather insights, have some deeper understanding of the things of those times, and therefore this argument doesn't hold any water that they were given for a safe custody kind of. If tomorrow every other politician tries to use our library as a bank safe deposit vault kind of, then what is the meaning of a library? So I think one should rubbish these kinds of arguments. If they were given to us, essentially it was for public consumption, and if they have been taken back, as the correspondence of Mr. Rizwan Qadri suggests us, there must be some reason why they don't want public to be given access to that.
So one possible reason, and I want to ask Jay Anant Dehadrai this, that one possible reason could be the private nature of the conversations in those letters. Now, obviously, we know that part of these boxes had letters from Nehru as Prime Minister to Edwina Mountbatten, the wife of the last Viceroy of India, Lord Mountbatten. There were letters written by Pandit Nehru to Albert Einstein, Jayaprakash Narayan, Padmaja Naidu, Vijayalakshmi Pandit, a whole host of stalwarts at that time. But the contention by the Congress party is, why is the BJP and now the members of the PMML interested only in the letters between Pandit Nehru and Edwina Mountbatten? They are chasing after some kind of salacious gossip or headlines. And because these conversations were private in nature, the family, who are the custodians of these letters, are choosing not to make them public.
Hi, Zakka. Good evening, and thank you for having me on your show.
The information is not correct.
Sorry, is that...
let Jay respond,
Zakka, firstly, thank you for having me on your show. Here's what I think from a legal perspective, strictly speaking, and without wading into this political controversy that is now erupting between the BJP and the Congress. Jawaharlal Nehru was our Prime Minister for 16 long years. So all of the correspondence that emanated from his desk from the time when he took over as Prime Minister till, of course, he passed away when he was still in harness, is of great historical importance to India, not only to researchers, but in fact, to anybody that is interested in understanding how the politics of that time was shaped, and also to understand, how we have the policies that we ended up having after those 16 long years that Pandit Nehru was Prime Minister. So there is this incredible historical importance which touches upon many different areas. Now, insofar as communication with, Lord Mountbatten's wife is concerned, Edwina Mountbatten, certainly if 51 cartons of correspondence has been taken back by the Gandhi family, as has been claimed, then I'm sure there would be a large number of letters between those two as well. And we know this now because it is in fact Lord Mountbatten's own daughter, Pamela Mountbatten, who's written a book about it and said that her mother and Pandit Nehru shared a very profound relationship and that they were deeply in love with each other and respected each other. Now, the point is that when you have the daughter of the Mountbattens herself making this really startling claim about Pandit Nehru's association with, essentially the last British ruler who remained in India, then I think it is of extreme historical importance, and I think we all deserve to know what's in those letters and to what extent Pandit Nehru's involvement was with the Mountbattens in terms of understanding how they influenced his decision making. Nobody certainly is interested in whatever their personal equation may or may not have been. I certainly, for one, am not interested, but I'm extremely interested as an aware citizen in knowing how Pandit Nehru, if at all, was influenced by Mrs. Mountbatten on behalf of Lord Mountbatten. These are important issues. And one last thing, which is that, in the United States, Zakka, you have these presidential libraries that come up, which hold all of that archival content when a president demits office. And it is widely understood around the world, especially in democracies, that all of the material that is generated during the term, when the leader is in office, that belongs to the nation. And the nation deserves to know what happened, what were the decisions that were made, who were the people that their leader was corresponding, had correspondence with. So these are all very valid questions, and I think it's a little insulting. And this is my personal view. I think it is demeaning and insulting to me as a citizen that you have this family that will sort of decide when they want to donate something, and once you've donated it, legally speaking, it's not yours anymore. You've given it away, and once it's been donated, you can't simply change your mind at the end of, I think it was UPA 1, that tenure of 5 years, just at the end of UPA 1, that suddenly someone advises Mrs. Sonia Gandhi, that look, maybe there's something embarrassing or titillating or salacious in those letters that might embarrass us later, and spoil the narrative that we've been creating for decades, that Pandit Nehru was this vaulted leader who did no wrong. So now please make sure that you take back all of that communication before any further harm is done to that image that the Nehru Gandhi family has created for themselves in India.
So I want to go back to the example that Jay had cited and ask Mr. Sahasrabudhe this. In the US, for example, there is a 50-year sort of cooling off period when classified documents that were given by presidents or by secretaries of state or any individual who was in government, after a 50-year period, they are then thrown open to the public. They are declassified. In India, we don't have that kind of a system where classified documents, after a period of time, after the after effects of those actions and those letters and those words are done and dusted, then as a matter of public record for for historians' interests and so on, those documents are declassified. We don't have such a practice. And the second point is also what Jay was referring to, which I want you to weigh in on, Mr. Sahasrabudhe, is the foundations of family foundations of US presidents. For example, Nancy Reagan had access to all the correspondence that Ronald Reagan had when he was president. She had access to all of it as part of the Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan Foundation. And then it is the foundation that took a call, ultimately, of course, in concert with the government of the day at that time. If there was confidential information which was, detrimental to the national security of the United States, then those letters are not released. But otherwise, the family gets to decide, or the family foundation gets to decide which letters to release and which letters not to release. Mr. Sahasrabudhe.
No, I think these are very enlightening examples of best practices elsewhere. And in our country, I don't know whether there are any rules and regulations about the archival collection and how it should be preserved and how it should be made available to the public. But that apart, when a particular set of papers is handed over to a public charitable trust called Nehru Memorial Library earlier, which is now known as Pradhan Mantri Sangrahalaya and Library, I think it becomes a public property. And all of a sudden you take it away, and for last 15 years you are just keeping mum about it. And let me set the record straight. What Mr. Rizwan Qadri, one of our colleagues in the Pradhan Mantri Sangrahalaya, has asked for is a whole set of papers which include correspondence between then Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru with Jayaprakash Narayan, Padmaja Naidu, Albert Einstein, Aruna Asaf Ali, Vijaya Lakshmi Pandit, Babu Jagjeevan Ram, Pandit Govind Vallabh Pant, and of course Edwina Mountbatten. Well, the people who are now having the custody of it, they can say that certain letters with certain people we may not be able to make available, but others we can, and they can safely hand them over to us.
Okay.
Even one can see a point in that. But keeping a total mum and having some kind of a blockade information blockade, indulging in that kind of a move, I think is just not acceptable in the era of transparency and accountability. And I believe that wiser counsels will prevail, and what is the property of Pradhan Mantri Sangrahalaya will be restored.
If this matter is not resolved between the two parties, which is the PMML and the Nehru Gandhi family, and if this matter goes to court, and I just want you to think out loud as a lawyer from a legal perspective, can the family take refuge behind privacy as a fundamental right? Will it apply, for example, to dead persons? Both Pandit Nehru and Edwina Mountbatten are dead. The test of privacy, can it apply to individuals who are no longer with us? Number one. And number two, the test of public good. What public good is served by releasing these letters, which, as the Congress party argues, is very much private in nature?
Zakka, I think you ask an excellent question, and I think that's what it's going to boil down to ultimately. And in my mind, there is no doubt whatsoever that the public good in this case, in bringing out all of this correspondence, will far outweigh any privacy concerns that the Gandhi family might claim. And I ask myself this question: what privacy concern could possibly prevent any of us from looking at this very important communication between the country's first prime minister and between, in fact, I would stick my neck out and say this, that even the communication with Mrs. Mountbatten is very critical and very important, because it might put a lot of decisions that India made in the context, say, of the imperial powers and so on, in a new light. So why shouldn't this information come out? And the only reason that comes to my mind is that perhaps that there is a fear, that there will be a fear of embarrassment, perhaps a fear of something coming out that the Gandhis will be deeply embarrassed by. I mean, what else could it possibly be? And insofar as the legal test here is concerned, it has to be seen in terms of public good. This is, after all, historical material now. It concerns all of the communication between the first prime minister, and for 16 long years he was prime minister. Let's not forget that. So there are so many decisions and policy decisions that were taken in that period that still have a bearing on the India of today. So it would be nice to be able to understand the context in which those decisions were taken, and to understand how a person thinks, a leader thinks, or how decisions are made. You paint a picture by looking at all of the correspondence that person has done, their writings, and Pandit Nehru was a prolific writer. So we should have access to all of his writings, in my view.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Jayanand Hadre and Vinay Sasrabudhe, thank you very much for joining us. It's a fascinating story. It has historians completely glued to the trajectory of the story, and also legal aficionados as well, because ultimately I think this will end up in a legal battle for custody and as to who keeps custody of these letters, and whether or not the Prime Minister's Memorial Museum and Library can have access, if not custody, but at least access to what these letters contained. We'll take a break here in the program. When we come back, it's an obituary to one of the legends of classical music in the world, in fact. Tabla maestro Zakir Hussain passed away at the age of 73. He was battling prolonged illness with heart-related ailments. He was 73. He breathed his last at a hospital in San Francisco in the United States. The legendary tabla maestro leaves behind a legacy that is cherished. It's respected by countless music lovers around the world. As the world mourns the loss of the legendary tabla virtuoso Zakir Hussain, on the other side, we pay a tribute to one of India's most revered classical musicians.